If you've ever felt your whole life collapse in a single afternoon, stay with this story till the very last line. And if it touches you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because stories like this deserve to travel far. The email came at 3:47 p.m., cold and perfectly spelled, the kind that pretends it's just doing business while quietly breaking your heart. Sarah Malik read it 3 times while the hospital hallway blurred around her, the beeping monitors and rolling carts fading into a distant hum. Position terminated effective immediately. No explanation that made sense. No thank you for the nights she slept on plastic chairs. No mention of the lives she'd held together with trembling hands. Just a signature and a reminder to return her badge. She slid it off, her neck like it had burned her skin, and walked out through the same doors she'd once run, through to save strangers. Outside, the sky was low and gray, pressing down like it knew her secret. Her phone buzzed, rent due, mother's meds, her brother's college fees, but she silenced it and started walking. The bus felt too public for a shame this heavy. Each step home felt like a confession she didn't want to make. Fired. At 32. A nurse without a hospital. She replayed the last week in her mind. The argument with a new administrator. The patient she refused to discharge because something felt wrong. Policy, they'd said. Insured beds, they'd said. She'd said no. Halfway down the long service road by the old industrial park, the wind shifted. It wasn't just wind. It was thunder that didn't belong to the sky. A deep, chopping roar rolled over her shoulders, rattling the loose signboards and lifting dust into her eyes. Sarah stopped, heart pounding, as 2 black helicopters dropped out of the clouds like questions without answers. People scattered. Cars braked hard. The ground trembled as the helicopters landed in the empty lot beside her. Grass flattening under the force. Doors slid open. Men in dark uniforms jumped out, shouting into radios. And then she heard it. Clear, urgent, impossible. "Where's the nurse? Where's the nurse?" She took a step back. They couldn't mean her. She was nobody now, fired and walking home with blistered feet and a future she couldn't see. But one of them looked straight at her, eyes sharp, scanning, and ran. "Ma'am, Sarah Malik?" He called, breathless. "We need you now." Her mouth opened and closed. I'm not working," she said, the words tasting bitter. "You've got the wrong person." "We don't," another voice cut in. A woman with a medical patch on her sleeve pressed a tablet into Sarah's hands. On the screen was a grainy live feed from a remote mountain clinic, power flickering. A child lay still, skin pale, chest barely moving. "Septic shock," the woman said. "Our team is pinned by a landslide. You treated a case like this last year. You caught it early. You saved him." Sarah's knees went weak. She remembered that night, the smell of antiseptic. The way everyone said she was overreacting until the labs came back screaming. "I don't have my kit," she whispered. "You have your hands," the woman said softly. "And your mind, please." For a second, Sarah thought of her termination letter, of policy and paperwork, of the badge sitting heavy in her pocket like a lie. Then she thought of the child on the screen and the mother somewhere off camera, praying into her palms. She nodded once. The helicopter swallowed her whole. Noise and vibration and fear braiding together. As they lifted, the city shrank into a patchwork of lights and roads, and Sarah felt something she hadn't felt since the email arrived. Purpose. Not permission, purpose. They landed on a narrow ridge near dusk. The clinic was a concrete box clinging to the mountain, generator coughing. Inside, the air was thin and thick with worry. Sarah didn't ask who authorized this or why helicopters were calling her name. She washed, she assessed, she moved. She taught the local nurse how to mix the meds with what they had, how to warm fluids without power, how to watch for the turn, the moment the body either fights or surrenders. Hours passed like breaths. At one point, Sarah caught her reflection in a cracked mirror, hair frizzed, eyes fierce, and realized she was exactly where she belonged. When the child's color returned, when the chest rose stronger, the room exhaled together. Someone cried. Someone laughed. Sarah just closed her eyes and let the shaking stop. They flew her back in the dark. No sirens this time, just quiet. At the lot where they'd found her, the helicopters lifted away like secrets kept. Sarah stood alone again, but different. Her phone buzzed. a voicemail from an unknown number. She listened. "This is Dr. Elaine Porter," the voice said. "I'm on the board at your hospital. We've been reviewing your termination. There are concerns. Call me." Sarah didn't call back yet. She walked home, slower now, listening to the night. And if you're still watching, if this moment has you leaning forward, hit like and subscribe, because the second part of this story is where the fire really starts. The next morning, the city woke to rumors. Videos from the industrial park had gone viral, 2 helicopters. Men shouting for a nurse, a woman climbing aboard in worn sneakers. The comments argued about everything except the truth. Sarah made tea, hand steady, heart not. When she finally returned the call, Dr. Porter didn't waste time. "What you did last week," she said, "refusing that discharge, it saved a life. The patient crashed 2 hours after leaving. Another hospital caught it. We were wrong. I lost my job for being right," Sarah replied, not angry, just tired. "You did," Porter said. "And we're prepared to fix that publicly." By noon, Sarah was back in a boardroom she never wanted to see again. Administrators shifted. Policies were recited. Sarah spoke once. She talked about the cost of rushing care, about listening when something feels wrong, about the quiet courage of nurses who stand between a spreadsheet and a heartbeat. She didn't mention helicopters. They offered her the job back. Promotion even. She asked for something else. "A patient safety review," she said. "Mandatory. And protections for staff who speak up." The room stilled. Then Porter nodded. "Done." That afternoon, Sarah returned to the mountain clinic by phone. The child was sitting up eating soup. The mother smiled like a sunrise. "You didn't quit on him," she said through a translator. Sarah swallowed. "Neither did you." Weeks later, the hospital held a press conference. They spoke about accountability, about listening, about a nurse who refused to compromise care. Sarah stood off to the side, not for applause, but for the quiet nods from other nurses who finally felt seen. When the microphones turned to her, she said one sentence: "Do the right thing early and fewer helicopters have to land." If you've made it this far, thank you for staying. Share this story with someone who's walking home after a hard day, who thinks being fired means being finished. Like and subscribe if you believe courage should be louder than policy. Because sometimes, when the world says you're done, it's just clearing the sky so the right people can find you and shout your name. When it matters most, the story wasn't over. If anything, this was the moment it truly began. So stay with me till the end. And if this part keeps your heart racing, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because what happens next is something every hardworking soul needs to hear. Sarah thought the helicopters were the climax of her life, the strange miracle she'd never fully explain. But miracles have a way of opening doors you didn't know existed, and sometimes those doors lead straight into fire. The morning after the press conference, she walked back into the hospital not as a broken employee, but as someone everyone suddenly watched. Some smiled with pride, others with suspicion. Fame inside a workplace is a fragile thing. She felt it in the way conversations stopped when she passed, in the way administrators now chose their words too carefully. Being proven right didn't make her life easier. It made it heavier. Patients began asking for her by name. Nurses quietly thanked her for saying what they'd been afraid to say for years. But pressure followed just as fast. Emails piled up. Meetings multiplied. Policies were rewritten slowly, painfully, with resistance at every turn. One senior administrator cornered her near the elevators and said, half joking, "You've made things complicated." Sarah looked him straight in the eye and replied, "Lives usually are." That night she went home exhausted, wondering if standing up had been worth the cost. Then the call came. A private number, a calm voice. "This is the National Emergency Medical Council. We want you to consult on a rapid response ethics unit." Sarah sat down hard on her couch. They'd seen the footage, read the reports, heard about a nurse who chose a patient over policy and didn't flinch. The role would mean travel, long hours, impossible decisions. It would also mean less time with her mother, fewer quiet evenings, more weight on her shoulders. She asked for one night to think. That night, her mother held her hand and said, "You were always like this. Even as a child, you ran toward the crying. Not away from it." Sarah cried then, not from fear, but from clarity. She accepted the role the next morning. Weeks turned into months. Sarah found herself in disaster zones. Understaffed hospitals, forgotten clinics. She trained teams, rewrote protocols, stood between frightened staff and angry systems. Not every battle was won. Sometimes she went home knowing someone had died anyway. Those nights hurt the most. But she kept going because every life saved echoed louder than the losses. One winter evening, as snow blurred the city lights, Sarah received a message from the mountain clinic. A photo. The child she'd helped was now standing, smiling, holding a school book. Under it, a simple line. "I want to be a nurse." Sarah stared at the screen for a long time, tears slipping free. In that moment, she understood something profound. Impact doesn't end when the crisis does. It ripples. Back at her old hospital, changes were finally visible. Whistleblower protections were real. Patient discharge protocols were slower, safer. Younger nurses spoke up more. And when one of them froze during a critical case, Sarah stepped beside her, steady and calm, and whispered, "Trust what you see. You're not alone." The patient lived. 1 year later, on the anniversary of the day she was fired, Sarah walked the same road where she'd once felt invisible. The industrial lot was quiet. No helicopters, no shouting, just wind and sunlight. She smiled, not because she needed rescue anymore, but because she'd learned she never did. Her worth had never been in a job title or a badge. It had always been in her courage. So if you're watching this and you feel overlooked, dismissed, or broken by a system that forgot your value, remember Sarah. Sometimes the moment you think you're losing everything is the moment the world is about to call your name. Stay kind, stay brave. And if this story moved you even a little, like, share, and subscribe because the right stories, like the right people, deserve to be seen.